Geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gats and gittens, welcome to another exciting, thrill-packed episode of Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me, Chuck Dixon, questions about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. Yes, this is your college of insider comic book knowledge. And, the show's kind of evolved into, what do you think of this, Chuck? So sometimes it's not about comic books. It's just about my unguarded and sometimes worthless opinion on lots and lots of subjects and topics. And there's a number of them today, a number of non-comic book questions about craft, questions about media, questions about history. I'll take them all on. Apparently, people like watching it. Listen, well, a few of you, small, merry little band of you. But I'm happy. I'm happy you're here. Let's not waste another second of your precious time. I've wasted too many already. Jason B. I'm working on a novel, and in it, the character travels to a foreign land and interacts with the locals as one does. The question is how to eloquently use a translator so as not to just, what is it? Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. This is like a little scenario. Chuck asked something, the translator translated, the local replied, the translator translated it to Chuck. Repeat. Besides keeping conversations brief, any advice on how to avoid the interactions would be appreciated. So in your novel, you want to have a character in a foreign land, just to reiterate, who needs a translator. And you want to present their conversation accurately as far as you're concerned. And you want to include all of the exchanges with the translator and the interviewee. And you're worried that would get tedious because you're going to be repeating stuff over and over and over again. Well, what you do is you do that exchange a couple of times and then simply ignore it. Like simply ignore the fact that there are different levels to the exchange between the monolingual person and the person they're trying to talk to through a translator. If that makes any sense. Just establish for the reader that this stuff's being translated, that your lead character doesn't understand the language. And just go on. Because your reader, they just want the information. They really don't care how they get it. As long as you've established that, there's a translator involved, that's enough. Ed McBain, the writer of the 87th Precinct novels, he realized that readers reach a point in a story where they're impatient and they just want more information. And so they don't want descriptions of how the people are talking or anything else. They want he said, she said, and sometimes once you know who's involved in the conversation, you don't even need that. You can just follow the conversation by the dialogue. You don't have to indicate who's saying it, because now you understand these two people are arguing and you can follow along. And I mentioned Ed McBain because sometimes he would reach a point where he knew the readers, they just want the resolution of the mystery, because he wrote police procedural mysteries. They just want to know what happened. And so a lot of his novels will simply end with a Q&A, and it will have, it'll read like a movie script. It'll just have the character, what they're saying. And it would just have the dialogue just laid out like that for page after page. And you didn't care. The mood had already been set. You had already been introduced to all the characters. You didn't need any more embellishment. You just wanted to know what the hell happened. How did the lady's head end up on the subway tracks and her body on a barge in the bay? And that's all you cared about. So you can take those kind of shortcuts. You don't have to go through the whole thing of translating. Readers are smart. Readers get it. Readers need a remarkably little or small amount of information. because they're going to provide a lot of information. If you've given a vivid enough description of your characters and what's going on in the mood and the setting and the weather or whatever, they're going to fill all the rest in. I was talking to a couple of screenwriters who were getting ready to adapt a novel of mine, and they said that they really thought it was great that I never described my main character. We just know that he's male and he's in his mid-20s, and we really don't know anything else about him. And they said that allowed them to basically create their own image of him. And that's what you're doing. You're helping the reader create images in their mind. You're not painting the pictures for them. You're basically providing a, paint by number for them. You're giving them the basic image, and they're going to fill in all kinds of crazy details that you never thought of. And I said to these screenwriters, when they were asking me all these different questions or telling me things about my novel, I was like, you're telling me things about my novel I didn't know, or I didn't realize, or you're wrong, and that was just a mistake, or a happy accident. There's a character in a novel called Dawn, and they say, you named her Dawn because she's a source of light in the main character's life. And I'm like, nah, I named her Dawn because I went to high school with a girl named Dawn, and I needed a name. So there you go. So yeah, don't worry so much about it. Don't worry. And if you are worried, write the sequence and have someone read it, and then ask them, did I make it clear? Joshua Ignatowski, you got any tips and tricks a writer can use to make the process of writing more fun or enjoyable? Have you done it in your career? Well, I like writing, so I really don't need to make it more enjoyable, but I guess you can. You can make it. Now, there are people who hate writing. There are talented people who hate writing. They hate the process. And they got to do all kinds of crazy stuff to motivate themselves. But generally, I look forward to writing. I'm going to confess something here. A lot of times on weekends, if I'm involved in writing a novel and I don't work on the weekends, I spend my weekend just thinking about what I'm going to write on Monday. Can't wait till Monday gets here so I can get back to work. So I like writing. But even that, I will, I'll have coffee. That helps writing. And, nice little break between paragraphs, sip of coffee. A very, very talented novelist that I know, a friend of mine, he said once he didn't drink coffee, and my immediate response was, well, then who writes your novel? I can't imagine writing without coffee. Now, when I first began my writing career, I was not a coffee drinker. I wasn't a coffee drinker until I went to a BAT summit. And everybody else was, they were coffee junkies. And I tried it and I liked it. So, and then the only other thing I do is I might listen to music, but it's got to be ambient, classical piano or, Cal Jader or, something like that. Dave Brubeck. I've been listening to a lot of Chopin recently. And when I say listen, I'm not really listening. It's just background noise. So I don't feel alone. But those are the only real enhancements. Because I like what I do. Joshua, you get a twin spin. I think this is your first special new spin graphics that I worked so hard on, that I spent 10 minutes on. Joshua is back, of course, with what movies and books do you think are good examples of deconstructed plot lines done really well? Now, what is a deconstructed plot line? Almost any good story features unforeseen events. The story does not go as planned. The characters' wishes are thwarted or denied. There are obstacles placed in their path. That's what makes a good story, for the most part. In almost every instance, that's what makes a good story. Moby Dick, Captain Ahab on his quest to find the white whale that took his leg, runs into all kinds of problems. Problems with the crew, problems with weather, complications here and there. And that old whale, well, he ain't going to give up so easy. So that's a problem too. So, Moby Dick, for my money, the first great action novel ever written, is a deconstructed plotline for much of the second half of the book, where things just don't go right for Ahab and the crew of the Pequod. So that's what a deconstructed plotline is. Now, your deconstruction can come early in the story. In Psycho, it comes very early. We begin a story, if you go into the movie cold, and if you've never seen it, I don't want to spoil things for you, so go away. But when the movie opens, it's about Janet Leigh, and she's embezzled money from her bank, and she's heading out of town. She's going to, meet her new sweetheart, and they're going to live a life in Rio or something on the bank's money. And if you watched it, if you went into it cold, not knowing anything about what was going to happen next, you would think, well, this is what the movie's about. It's old Hitchcock turning up the suspense. Will she get caught? What are they going to do to her? Is she going to be able to get away? Is she going to live a life of being on the run, looking over her shoulder every second? No, she's not, because she's not going to live much longer. Before the first act is over, Janet Leigh is dead, famously murdered in the shower. And from there on, it's deconstructed plotline, because now it's not even her story anymore. It's Norman Bates's story. And he runs into all kinds of complications in his desire to not get caught and to protect the identity of his mom. So that's where, the deconstruction begins early in the story. Now, in The Dirty Dozen, the deconstruction comes late in the story. There's lots of setup. These 12 guys are picked out of a bunch of convicted convicts in the army, and they're basically made to volunteer on a mission to take out a bunch of Nazi generals on the day before the Normandy landing. And we see a lot of setup and their training and conflict, but that's not all deconstruction, because that's to be expected. That's all part of a story, the old boot camp story where nobody likes the commanding officer, nobody likes the drill sergeant, whatever. That's just whatever. Now, third act, it all goes to hell, because they've got this perfect plan that they've laid out, and nothing goes right. Telly Savalas becomes a wrecking ball. He's a loose cannon on the mission. They have to change their plans. They have to change every way they were going to do everything, and results in total chaos, and results, again, I don't want to spoil anything, in almost, all of the dozen except Charles Bronson dying, because you just can't kill Charles Bronson. So that's deconstruction late in the story. Or you can have a story with no deconstruction. Ferris Bueller's Day Off is that rare film where it all pretty much goes the way Ferris wanted it to go. He takes his day off, and no matter what his sister does to try to thwart him, or the principal does to try to thwart him, Ferris is either oblivious to what they're doing or easily overcomes the obstacles. And it's normally a story like this would be boring, but this one's not. It's endlessly entertaining. Most people who see this movie love this movie. It's sweet, it's funny, and smart. And the little backstory on it. This was written John Hughes wrote this movie like in 3 days, because there was a writer's strike coming. And he pitched the movie to Paramount, I believe. And they said they loved the idea. But the writer's strike was coming. And they'd have to wait till the writer's strike was over. And he goes, but if I get the screenplay into you before the writer's strike, we can go into production. And I said, Jim, how are you going to do that? So he went home and did it. Now the screenplay he handed in, frankly, was a mess. And they filmed the mess. And then they went back in, and Hughes worked closely with an editor who apparently was a genius. And he moved all the events around, because when they showed the initial cut to preview audiences, they hated it. They hated Ferris. They hated Cameron. They hated everything. And they took it back, and an editor rearranged the events in the story so that you would like Ferris and like Cameron. And, so basically just rebuilt it, just sort of rearranged it like Legos, and then it worked. And but anyway, it's an example of a story that there's really no deconstruction in it. Some of the characters suffer deconstruction. His sister, the principal, certainly, but the main characters don't. Now, for me, the ultimate deconstruction epic is the Hot Rock, because the Hot Rock, the whole purpose of this movie is deconstruction. It's based on a Don Westlake caper comedy, a funny heist novel about John Dortmunder and his crew of thieves who steal a rare African emerald or diamond, I can't remember which, and everything that could go wrong does go wrong. And so they have to keep stealing it over and over and over again. And it's great because, from the first act on, nothing goes right for these guys, but they rise to the challenge. They figure it out. They even when you think, okay, all is lost, just give up, guys. They don't. Dortmunder never gives up. And, for me, it's like the granddaddy, the pinnacle of the deconstructed plotline. Because everything happens naturally, everything happens organically. Each element of each challenge comes along because of something that happened previously or something they did previously. In some cases, they cause their own problems. In some cases, it's happenstance or just bad luck. But it's just if you've never seen it, it's an excellent movie. It's very funny, but very suspenseful as well, and just a good time at the movies. It's a movie that deserves to be better known than it is. And please God, don't let them remake it. It's perfect the way it is. Triple spin. Look at you. Joshua Iwatowski, all grown up with triple spin. Okay, previously on Ask Chuck Dixon, you've talked about how the Wrath was a direct antithesis to Batman in a way the Joker isn't, because of how the Wrath's MO and goals are so similar to Batman's ones, just morally reversed. This leads me to ask, do you think there are any heroes or anti-heroes who count as a direct antithesis to the Joker in the same way? Maybe the Creeper, the Heckler, Anarchy, Ambush Bug. Creeper's good. I think Ambush Bug kind of exists outside of continuity because he refers to the fourth wall so much. He's like more on our side of the comic book page than he is on the other side, if that makes any sense. Creeper, I like Creeper because there's a lot of questions about the Creeper. Does he actually become crazy when he becomes a Creeper? Is he in control? So here's a character that possibly is going to be as unpredictable as the Joker. And because he's a Ditko character, and if you take a Ditko character to its extreme, it's going to be an extremely unforgiving character as well. He's not going to have any time for Joker. But I can see a story in which the Joker thinks he's recruited a Creeper. Like, we're like souls. Both have green hair. We both laugh a lot. We should be buds. And maybe the Joker thinks he's recruited the Creeper to his side. And of course, the Creeper destroys all of his plans. I think another great foil for the Joker, and I don't know if anybody's ever done a story with Batmite and the Joker. They have to have, right? How did Alan Grant? Alan Grant must have done a story with Batmite and the Joker. Because he loved Batmite. I love Batmite too. But Batmite, again, another agent of chaos, who could, instead of showing up to drive Batman crazy, could show up and drive the Joker crazy. And I'm sure Batmite isn't even considered in DC continuity now, which is a shame. Because, you could play with, I know Alan did it. Was it a special or a Legends of the Dark Knight thing? It's a one-off crazy story that Alan Grant did that was marvelous. Okay. You get Quad Spin. You're the first person to debut of the new Quad Spin graphic. Just for you. Joshua comes back with Swiss cheese or provolone. All right, I'm going to indulge you on this one. It's got to be Swiss cheese. Provolone to me, I'm sorry. Provolone to me doesn't really taste like anything. Swiss cheese tastes the way you think cheese should taste. I particularly used to like the Swiss lace. Isn't this fascinating? Low fat. I don't eat any cheese now because I got to watch my cholesterol. But if I had to, if you held a gun to my head, Chuck, you're going to eat this provolone or you're going to eat this Swiss, or we're going to gun you down. I was like, okay, I'll take the Swiss. I hope that never happens. My cholesterol. Paul Petrick. In episode number 196 of Ask Chuck Dixon, you state that the change in the art style of the Batman comic books changed because of the 1966 Batman television show. Actually, the art style changed in 1964 as part of new editor Julia Schwartz's new look changes to the Batman titles. In the early 60s, very poor sales promoted Schwartz to be assigned to save the Batman titles from cancellation. His was the first of several. Denny O'Neil, circa 1970, Frank Miller in 1986, periodic attempts to make Batman comics more grounded. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I got that wrong. I was relying on childhood memory. Because to me, the arrival of New Look Batman and the arrival of the TV show, I kind of conflated them in my mind. I was kind of excited about New Look Batman because I had really gotten tired of the direction the Batman books had taken, Detective and Batman. And when I was a kid, I was only reading the 80-page giants because they showed earlier stories. When I was a kid, it was, Batman versus aliens all the time. He was in space, or space creatures were coming to him, or he was traveling through time, or they had all kinds of wacky, rainbow Batman, stuff like that. And to me, it wasn't Batman, and it wasn't Batman. They were trying to appeal to the kids' tastes at the time, changing kids' tastes. And while these, it's perfectly natural and makes sense for Superman to encounter science fiction elements, it made no sense for Batman. And, I was one of those readers who walked away. So I'm one of the reasons they did the New Look. Now, when they brought the New Look out, I was pretty excited about it. And I bought a bunch of them when I was a kid, particularly if Carmen Infantino was doing the art. But I stopped buying after a while because, the stories just weren't good. Nothing on Gardner Fox, but the stories were always just, riddles rather than stories. They were puzzles to be solved, and there wasn't much character development, stuff like that going on. And so, I kind of walked away from New Look. And but my premise that the 66 show had an effect on the comics, of course, is true, because the invention of Batgirl was done in conjunction with the television show. Because the TV show was going to do Batgirl, and I was like, this is what we're doing. This is what her costume looks like. This is where we're going. And DC had to basically play follow-up and present Batgirl to the Silver Age audience. I remember, I think I bought the first comic with Batgirl. When you're a kid, it's like, oh, it's something new. So I bought a few issues because Batgirl was in it, because it is something different. I'm a Batman fan. I need to know about Batgirl. I need to know what's going on here. I need to be filled in. So I picked them up. But yeah, you were right. I conflated, I will admit I was wrong. And actually, thank you for correcting me. Now I'll hopefully remember it right in the future. Ace Mowick. Ace, boy, I spelled your name wrong. What would you say was the best advice you got from each of your editors that you have used since? And how would you rank the advice? If you could rank Archie, Denny, and Larry, what order would you put them in? Well, I'm gonna do these in the order that I worked with these guys. Because I'm not going to rank them in order of X. That's terrible. It's people I know. They're not, TV shows. Larry, Larry's advice was like never given to you. Like, listen, this is what you need to do. You would just sort of listen to Larry. I spent as much time with Larry as I could because I wanted to hear what he had to say on any subject. If Larry told you about the creation of shoelaces, you'd want to listen because he would make it interesting. He would have some angle on it that you'd never thought about before. So he's a great guy to listen to also because he was a free thinker, because you never knew what Larry was going to say. When you have friends and stuff, you basically know their opinions about stuff. You know where they're coming from. In a conversation what their take is going to be. Forget it with Larry. I think even his closest friends never know what the hell is going to come out of this guy's mouth. What's in his mind. So I just listened to him. And one of the things I learned was that gratitude and a certain demeanor that you have to have within your profession. You don't complain about other freelancers. You don't complain about editors. You don't, especially ones that have done you favors. And I very rarely ever heard Larry say something insulting about another freelancer. Now, insulting to other freelancers, yes. If you're going to get stabbed by Larry, it was going to be in the front. He's going to be looking you in the eyes and say, you suck. You have no talent. Go back to driving a bus. But you talking behind people's backs and things like that. And he's like, nah, it's not good. And again, this wasn't like the advice delivered to me. This was him leading by example. And the best example, and I've described before for regular listeners, was after Jim Shooter got fired, a bunch of editors were standing in the hallway, and I was like fly on the wall, just standing there. And they were all telling Shooter horror stories, about how they'd been mistreated, how much they hated him, and how much they were glad he was gone. And Larry was there, and somebody said to Larry, well, you have more reason to dislike Shooter than anybody. And he did. I won't tell you that story, but it's true. Larry had a legitimate reason to not like Jim Shooter, not trust Jim Shooter. And Larry said, he hired me. He gave me my job here. So I'm not going to disrespect the guy. I owe him that much. I was like, it's quite a lesson to learn. And I've always been cognizant of that going forward. And I've always cautioned freelancers who would complain about other freelancers to other freelancers like me, hey, you don't do that. You don't do that. You're messing with somebody's career. You wouldn't want somebody doing that to you. Now, Don Daly, who was my editor on Punisher for most of the time I was on Punisher, actually all the time I was on Punisher. Well, Tim Toohey did some editing as well. Another great guy. But Don Daly, the best advice he ever gave me was I was not going to go to my first Bat Summit. I was invited, wasn't told I had to be there, and I couldn't see where it was going to benefit me. I always worry that I'm going to say something stupid and get fired or blacklisted. Like that could ever happen. And I said, yeah, I don't think I'm going to go to this Bat Summit because I'm only writing the Robin miniseries. They don't really need me there. And Don said, how long you want to be in this business? And I was like, okay, yeah, all right. I don't even need to answer that question. Yeah, okay, I get it. I got to go to the Bat Summit. And I did. And of course, changed my life. Literally changed my life. Speaking of which, Denny, another guy, kind of led by example. about earnestness. You know, and I was earnest. I was a comic book geek. I love this stuff and everything else. But then he had like a deeper earnestness. Like I've been entrusted with the Batman. I am the Batman guy. And I'm taking that seriously. There was no joking around, no goofing. You know, he wasn't like pedantic about it. He wasn't like, a monster. He wasn't like this abusive college professor about it. But, you knew that Denny took his task very, very seriously, very, very earnestly. And so it created a mood of, we're not going to joke around about this. And I remember when they hired a new writer who took all of this kind of lightly and, would speak of the characters in derogatory ways. And then he kept the guy on, but I could see in his face it grated on him that it's like, you're not on the team with us. You're not. And he only hired people. I mean, Doug and Alan and his Denny's merry men, Scott and Gorf and Darren. These are all guys who are not serious about themselves. I mean, we had lots of laughs, but very, very serious about the work, making sure this was presented. We were very cognizant that the readers took these characters seriously, very, very much believed in them. So never got any real advice directly from Denny, but again, in a lot of cases like Larry, he, led by example. So I did learn a lot from Denny about how to act in the business. Now Archie Goodwin, again, another guy is sort of led by example. But the one, direct piece of advice he gave me was the, DC wanted all of their writers to take the Robert McKee story structure course, which was a 3-day seminar. And by day, I mean every waking moment. It's a boot camp for writers. And this guy, he was a screenwriter, and he would give his thoughts on story structure, everything else. And I was talking to Archie, and they said, we'll pay for it. We'll pay for your hotel room. You get a free weekend in the city, which was cool. And we'll pay for the seminar and cover all your meals and all that stuff. And so I said to Archie, I don't know, I'm not real big on these how-tos or seminars. I mean, is this really necessary? And Archie said, well, number one, we like it because he articulates things. McKee articulates things about writing that a lot of us have never articulated. Like we intuit it, but we've never really thought about it. And he goes, this gives us all a shared language. Everyone who's taken the story structure courses now has a shared language, so we can talk about what we're doing, and we all understand what we're talking about. And I said, well, that makes sense. That makes sense. And then he said, and the other thing is, he says, Archie said, what I got out of it personally was he taught me how to write when I don't feel like writing. He says, do you know what I mean? And I said, yeah, I do know what you mean. I know what you mean. When you got to get it done, but you really don't feel like it, and how to get yourself in the zone. And I thought, okay, Archie, I'll sign me up for the course. And I'm glad I did. I got a lot out of it. And Archie was right. McKee did articulate things that I just sort of had my lizard brain just sort of like, well, I know this, but I've never really thought about it, or I've never put words to it, or I've never really examined why I do this way and that way. And I did get a lot out of the seminar. It was pretty cool. So there you go. And I didn't rank them. And yes, I have other editors that I work with who are great that I could say things about, but we don't have all day. And there's a lot of editors I could say things that, well, I'm going to take Larry Hama's advice. Just not say anything at all. Louis A. Tayada. What history comics omnibuses do you recommend, and which is your favorite of them all? Also, what is your favorite badass history figure? Badass history figure, cool. Okay, as far as like war comics, Frontline Combat is like it was like the first serious, dramatic war comic, American war comic. It's definitely worth finding. They've done archives of it. Dark Horse did archives. They're probably a little expensive now, but Fantagraphics routinely prints collections of like they have a great collection of every John Severin war story from EC. I think it's called Bombs Away, but I think there's a Wallywood one. There might be a Jack Davis one. So they're still available, and I think relatively inexpensive. So Frontline Combat, Harvey Kurtzman, and the amazing artists who worked on Frontline Combat and Two Fisted Tales, the primo American war comics. Now there's two collections of Atlas war comics and big hardcovers, and they're pretty cool. Atlas was like second to Frontline Combat, used a lot of the same artists, Severin and Russ Heath. And the Atlas comics, they're not as, introspective or challenging or anything like that as the Harvey Kurtzman stuff. But they're awful damn good. They're good war stories. And particularly in this second volume, Atlas at War, you get Kirby, you get Sinnott, you get Severin and Heath, and I think I think there's some Jerry Robinson. Jerry Robinson did some amazing war comics for Atlas, but those are cool if you can find them. I mean, I know the war one is still in print as part of Fantagraphics Atlas Library. I don't know if Atlas at War is still in print. Now another one is Cinebooks did a 3-book series called The Battle, based on a novel by Patrick Rimbaud, and it presents a battle during the Napoleonic era in full detail, from the beginnings of the battle and the setup to the battle itself to the aftermath. And it's a terrific read both as a novel and as a graphic novel, meticulously researched in both cases, lots and lots of eye candy for military freaks in the comic. But if you find that, it's a Cinebook called The Battle, and there was a follow-up volume whose name I cannot remember about Napoleon in Russia, which is equally good. That's good stuff. I just discovered this myself. The collected works of Sergio Topi, and I came to the game way too late because the early volumes are like $200 a piece now. But this one, War Stories, by Sergio Topi, Italian comics master, is a really awesome book. And it in some cases, there's a science fiction element to some of the stories and everything else, but he contemplates the nature of war. These are dramatic, grown up, mature comics about warfare. And, but again, his meticulously researched. I love his costuming. He's got a storytelling style all his own, his stark black and white drawings. Very, very, very good. I mean, I just finished this the other day and I really, really enjoyed it. Now, another thing I can recommend is British comics. They put them in these, you can see this thing, these whopping big doorstop collections of British comics, like War Picture Library, Commando, things like that. And I'm like addicted to these things now. I mean, I have, I think, a dozen of these, and then I have a bunch of smaller volumes, smaller collections. But these are like readily available. You can find them on Amazon, or more likely find them on Amazon UK, which is where I bought a bunch of these. And they're just good reads and surprisingly mature, because they were written for boys. They were written for young adult boys, and but surprisingly mature themes. I don't mean, sex or graphic violence or anything else, but like the character conflicts in them and things like that. I mean, some of them are rah-rah boys' own adventure stories. And then some of them, have characters questioning why they're there, questioning the mission, stories that feature characters who are, cowards, and what results from that. And a lot of stories about soldiers who simply don't get along, which you don't see that often in American war stories, but apparently it's a big feature in British war stories. Because the British, primarily these are World War II stories. The Britain's view of World War II is largely different than here in the United States, partly because they were in the war so much longer. And partly because of their leadership. Their leadership sucked. The leadership, and not Winston Churchill, but on the battlefield, their commissioned officers, it was a mess. It's a wonder they lasted until we could get into the war to help them. Nothing wrong with the grunts, the guys on the ground, the Tommies. They were doing their job, but just like the French, who were defeated by the Germans, just terrible leadership at the outset of the war. Just disastrous, horrible mistakes were made. And so there's a lot of discontent in these war stories amongst the enlisted men. It's kind of interesting. Now, badasses. I'll name a few. Marshal Ney. Marshal Ney was an officer under Napoleon. And I think it was Marshal Ney that someone said to Napoleon, he's a drunk. He's not a nice guy. He doesn't bathe regularly. Whatever. You should get rid of him. And Napoleon's answer was, he's lucky. And basically, that's what I look for in a general. He's lucky. But Marshal Ney was staunch. I mean, he was with Napoleon from the beginning. He was there at Waterloo. He was up to the bitter end with Napoleon. And the coolest story about Marshal Ney was, in the previously mentioned excursion into Russia that Napoleon had, which turned into a huge disaster, and a horrible, absolutely horrific retreat from Russia through a Russian winter. To get the hell out of there before all the Cossacks showed up to kill them all. And the Cossacks killed a lot of them in the retreat. But just, if you've never read about it, just horrendous. And Napoleon makes it back to France with, he's lost, thousands of men and tons of equipment. So they're broke. His men are wounded. They're suffering from frostbite. They've been buried along the road. This is horrific, horrible things. And one of the worst things for Napoleon is Marshal Ney is lost. No one has seen Marshal Ney. They just assume he died. He died on the retreat. Well, Ney shows up in Napoleon's tent a month after everybody else, long after everyone else has shown up. And he shows up and his uniform is covered in blood. And the first thing Marshal Ney says to Napoleon is, "Don't worry, none of this blood is mine." Now that's badass. So, okay. Next one is George Washington. Now we think, he's on our money. He's on the quarter. He's the father of our country. And that's, he had wooden teeth. No, he didn't. But, that's the room. He chopped down the cherry tree, didn't lie about it. He threw $1 across the Potomac. All these other things we know about Washington. But what a lot of people don't know about Washington is he was a badass. He was a soldier. He fought in the French and Indian War on the British side. He was a surveyor, and which was more dangerous than being a soldier. He surveyed all the way into like the Ohio Valley and stuff like this. And you're traveling with a small entourage and his equipment. The scientific pinnacle of equipment of the day was used by surveyors. Chronometers and these particular chains and all these other devices, sextants, and all these other devices that I don't know the name of, and I can't even figure out how they worked. But they would take along these very, very expensive, very, very valuable devices to map rivers and altitudes and everything else that the Washington could figure out to map what was then the American West, the Ohio Valley, and the upper reaches of New York State and stuff like that. Well, this is an incredibly dangerous job to have because of the hostile Indian tribes. Indian tribes were fighting each other. They were fighting, the white people. They were fighting the English. The French and Indian War. The French are encouraging them. Before the French and Indian War, the French are encouraging them to rise up after the French and Indian War. The French are still, even though the French lost the war, they're still in there agitating. And you've got, the Pontiac Rebellion and everything else, where all of the forts, the British forts, are being laid siege to, and anybody caught on the trail who was from the wrong tribe or was English was being captured and subjected to the most horrible tortures before they died. I mean, days of torture in front of an unappreciative audience. And this is the country that Washington's wandering through, measuring mountains, taking readings and things like that, and drawing maps. So a tough guy. And then we get to the Revolutionary War. He takes command of the Continental Army, and he, through like sheer force of will, keeps this army together. There's a battle in which our side, the American side, they just up and ran. I mean, they saw the bayonets and we're out of here. And Washington wasn't having, I think it was Battle of Brooklyn. Washington wasn't having it. And he rode amongst them, slapping at them with the flat of his saber, and got them back in line himself. And just, if you read the story of the Battle of Brooklyn, Valley Forge, Battle of Trenton, everything else, all the near misses, and all of the talk about deconstructed plotline. I mean, everything that could go wrong went wrong in the throughout the entire time. I mean, the colonial army won very few battles in the Revolutionary War. They won the key ones, but they lost a lot of minor battles, and they lost a lot of territory, and a lot of them died. And a lot of them were taken prisoner and subsequently died in prison, on prison hulks and things like that. 10,000 Americans died in prison hulks. These were ships, there was these rotten old moldy ships that were just parked out in the harbor, and you were just thrown in there and put in chains. And you'd sit there for years until you died, until you finally succumbed to whatever the hell was going on. Disease, starvation, malnutrition, exposure, whatever. So yeah. Badass man, held the whole country together. Subutai was Genghis Khan's most talented general. He came up with a lot of the strategies that the Mongol hordes used to create the biggest empire ever seen in human history. It stretched from Europe all across Asia. And Subutai was the man. And he was a young guy. I think he was like a sheep herder or something. And Genghis Khan, early in his career, befriended him and his father, if I remember correctly, and brought them into the Mongol horde. And eventually Subutai was assigned his own horde, the Golden Horde, and ordered to head west by Genghis Khan. See what else there is out there for us to conquer. And Subutai rode out west across the Russian steppe and into Europe, conquering every peoples that he came across. And he was just a scouting party. So he took on 10-1 odds and always came out on top because of superior tactics and, incredible courage and ruthlessness. And the story goes that he was deep into, I believe, Poland, and he heard about a city to the east this great city to the east. And he and the Golden Horde were going to ride there and take it over. And that city was Paris. So the Golden Horde was going to ride to Paris and take over. And he got word that Genghis Khan had died and was called back to the headquarters of the Khans, whatever their main camp or whatever it was. And that's what he did. So this guy could have taken all of Europe with a scouting party, and he didn't. Different history. We would have had a different history. Speaking of different histories, the other badass I often think of, just off the top of my head, Shaka Zulu. Shaka Zulu was born with a withered arm, and a very protective mom, and he was born with a withered arm, with a handicap in a society that valued hunters and warriors, valued physical toughness and everything else. Well, he wasn't going to just give up and be the tribal gimp. He invented a new weapon that he could use with his withered arm. It was the assegai. It's a short-handled spear with a long blade. So he couldn't throw, but he could sure stab. And he gained this reputation, and this almost mystical reputation. The assegai is like the Excalibur to King Arthur, to Shaka Zulu. And he builds on this reputation to convince his tribe to take over the next tribe, the tribe they were intermittently warring with. But let's go to real war. Let's go to total war and take them over. And then he would take over the other tribe, and rather than kill the military-age males, he would just adopt them into his own tribe. And he did this over and over and over again until he created the Zulu nation. This was unlike any other part of Africa where the tribes were all disparate and disunited and had nothing to do with each other, just were at war with each other all the time. So often didn't even share the same language. He created this huge cohesive society with this set of rules. It was strict. I mean, he was a tyrant, absolute tyrant. But he was able to field an army of sometimes up to 50,000 men. It's unthinkable in sub-Saharan Africa. No one else could do this. Not only could he field 50,000 men at a time, but he had them broken up into regiments. He had rules for promotion. He had strategy, because the topography of South Africa is very unusual. There's no place else like it in the world. And he developed strategies based on the topography that made his army undefeatable. Now, he famously massacred the first British incursion that came into us. I mean, just totally wiped them out. Almost near annihilation. 1,600 men, I think, died at the Battle of Islawanda. And then his next set 2 battle with the British, and the British decide, well, we've had enough of this. And they go in, they have a set battle with the Zulus. Well, he kicks the British's ass then, too. They don't get annihilated, but they got to get the hell out of there. And then the British realize, well, we didn't anticipate this. This guy's like got a European level army here. This isn't a bunch of guys running around screaming, waving spears. This guy's got his act together. Now, at this time, Shaka Zulu was dead. His descendant, Sechaweo, was leading the Zulus. But same game. He was running Shaka Zulu's playbook. And so the British have to come up with this really unusual strategy, which I won't get into. And they ultimately defeat the Zulus, and they bring Sechaweo. They capture him. And I've talked about it in earlier videos. He actually becomes a celebrity figure in England. He becomes this beloved celebrity figure, Sechaweo. So anyway, I mean, Shaka Zulu, changed the course of history in Africa. And imagine if the American Indians had a Shaka Zulu figure who would be able to put together a tribe, a united tribe of 50,000, Cheyenne or Lakota Sioux I mean, we'd be living in a different country now. It'd be a whole different ballgame. Everything west of the Mississippi would be like Florida, where the Seminoles did not lose their Indian wars and are in a much better position in Florida than most Native Americans are in the rest of the country. But Shaka Zulu, yeah, badass, absolute badass. So thanks for asking that question. Obviously, I like talking about this stuff. Oh, Ace Mowick again. Why didn't I give you a twin spin? Why do I always? I think it's because you ask your questions separately and I don't realize. Anyway, I spelled your name right this time. Okay. You got that going for you. Okay, a relative of mine is currently writing a book she's been working on this last year. Do you have any suggestions to give her going through the usual channels of traditional publishing, looking for an agent, etc.? I suggest she self-publish, but she doesn't want to go that route. She's never watched your show before, so I figured she might listen to a professional if I put this episode in her face, assuming this question gets answered. Boy, good luck getting an agent. I've been writing for 40 years. I've never been able to get a literary agent. I had an agent lawyer represent me in a case, and then when it was done, I said, hey, could you represent me? She said no. It was a big case. I made money off it. She made money off it. No. So, and the people that I know who have literary agents, if you ask them about their literary agent, it's, they change the subject because they don't want to share their agent. They don't want to let you know even their agent's name. So getting a literary agent is really tough unless you know somebody or you're connected or whatever. Now, you suggested self-publishing, and that's the best advice. Self-publish. You go, well, I self-publish, I don't sell many. You have a book you can hand people. Lots and lots of cases, mine included, where an author self-published and then got picked up by an actual publishing house. It's not like a publishing house is going to go, oh, that was already published by Doodah Books. We don't want to touch that. No, they don't care. If they liked it, and if you can get some sales in self-publishing, and they look and like, okay, I mean, they did that on their own. Well, with our backing, we can go crazy. We can get this done. So self-publish. Because then you got a book to hand people. You're not handing them a manuscript. You're handing them a book, and it's real. Being published is the most important thing in publishing. I know that sounds stupid, but if you go in as a newbie to any publishing house, say, I have an idea for a book. Have you ever been published? No. They're way less likely to be interested in you than if you said, yes, I've been published, and it doesn't matter where. It doesn't matter where. If you were trying to get a job writing for TV, and have you ever been published? I wrote some articles for Popular Mechanics. I wrote some Dear Penthouse forum letters. You're published. That's it. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter where, as long as someone had faith enough in you to actually put your work in print. Then you've made it through the threshold. Now, related to the topic of self-publishing, and I haven't tried this myself yet, but Simon & Schuster has an ebook program where you go to them with your whatever, your novel or collection of short stories or poetry or whatever, and they will help you publish it. But you'll publish it through Simon & Schuster, and then you will have the benefit of being at Simon & Schuster, their marketing and everything else, and they're going to watch and go, hey, this sold. Let's put $100,000 behind promoting this book. Let's go big with it. So they're offering that program, which I've never used. I don't know anybody who has used it. My concern would be maintaining copyright. As long as they let me maintain copyright, yeah, I might do that. I might do it with my next book. Go the Simon Schuster route, see what happens. But that's an option. But yeah, self-publish. It's not that hard. It's really not that hard. And then it gets out there. And then you have something to hand people. Okay, one more thing. Just one more thing. I addressed Steven Spielberg a couple weeks ago, and I mentioned that his only work that wasn't sentimental or contained sentimentality or wasn't trying to be emotionally manipulative for its entire running time, was Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I got some pushback in the comments section below the video. And the guy said, oh, it was sentimental. There was sentiment because, I'm sorry if I'm making it sound like a moron. I'm sorry. He asked a reasonable question, or had a reasonable point to make. And he said it was sentimental because it was nostalgic about the old movie serials. And that made it sentimental because I said, I don't know if I said this in the video, but I said it in the comments, that Raiders of the Lost Ark is actually a quite hard-boiled, quite cynical story. Very unlike anything else Spielberg has done. Now, of course, it's inspired by the movie serials, but the vast majority of the audience, me included, are not nostalgic about the movie serials. You would have to have been like 60 years old to even have remembered the movie serials, 50 to 60 years old at the time Raiders was released. And that the majority of the audience for Raiders was not people 50 and older. Because I certainly was aware of movie serials. I had seen movie serials, but I had no nostalgia for them. I had no childhood memory of sitting in the movie theater watching Flash Gordon or Buck Rogers. I had no childhood memories of the Green Hornet, watching, going to the movies to see the next installment. So what my reference to movie serials while watching Raiders was simply appreciative. Like, okay, oh yeah, I see what they're going for here. But there's no nostalgic sentiment. And the movie's free. And even Lucas and Spielberg, they weren't old enough they didn't remember going to movie serials. Movie serials were done and gone and over with by the time they were of movie-going age. So they might have seen them at revival houses or whatever, but that's not the same thing as going to a Saturday matinee to see Hopalong Cassidy or the Three Musketeers. It's just not the same experience. So there's no nostalgia involved. And I still insist that Raiders of the Lost Ark is a very hard-boiled story, edged with quite a bit of cynicism. Every character in the story is out for what they want, what their own desire. Now, Indy talks about the nobility of preserving these archaeological artifacts and the importance of preserving our heritage, and these things are sacred to him and everything else. But would he go to those lengths, risking his life and everything else? I mean, when you see the naked want in his eyes when he sees these artifacts, it's not about putting it in a college or university museum for him. It's the desire that every collector has for a unique item. And that is to get that item, to be the one who got it, to have it in their collection. I mean, he wasn't after the Ark of the Covenant. He wasn't after that golden idol at the beginning of the story so that they could be, put in the Smithsonian. No, he wanted them in his university museum. He wanted it in his collection. He wanted to save those things from the ignominy of being in someone else's collection. And when he meets the French guy at the beginning of the movie, who is in the rest of the movie, we see the French guy shares this same desire, maybe a little bit more mercenary, shares this same desire. And it's weird to say, but the only people in the movie who want the Ark of the Covenant for altruistic reasons, quote unquote, altruistic, are the Nazis, because they think it's going to help them in their cause, right? They're not interested in it as an artifact. They just think this is something we can weaponize and help the Third Reich out, help us win the war, the coming war. So it's very hard. And then we get to the end of the movie, It's lacking a lot of the Spielberg usual ways of making us feel all weepy or bring a tear to our eyes or, a tingle to our spine or whatever effect Spielberg's going for. We don't get the endless scenes of people looking off the screen, looking at something off screen. They're looking gobsmacked and just bathing in the awesomeness of what they're looking at. At the end of Raiders, Indy tells Marion, look away. They don't look at the Ark. Just look away. Don't look at it. So we don't get that scene. And also we get to the ending of the movie, which is a really, really cynical ending where the Ark is now in the hands of the good guys. It's been taken away from the Nazis. It's in the hands of the good guys. And Indy doesn't get what he wants. He doesn't get it to put it on display. He doesn't have the pride of having it in his collection. No, it's taken away from him. And to make it even worse, and Indy doesn't even know this, only we as the audience know this, to make it even worse, it's now just going to get lost in government bureaucracy. It's just crated up and put in a warehouse. There's probably 1,000 other warehouses like it. God knows what's in all those crates. And it's just left to be forgotten. One of the greatest archaeological objects, this biblical artifact, this real, mystical thing is just going to be stacked away and forgotten, like, your granddad's old 77 RPM records. So, there's nothing sentimental about that. There's not, and the way he goes around killing people. He has no problem, gunning them down, beating people with whips. This is not, Marion's not a sentimental character. She's tough. She's tough. She's hard boiled. So I'm going to say it. No, it's his best film without a question. And it's his best film because it doesn't have any of the Spielbergisms in it. And it isn't a big weepy sentimental fest or goofy like too many of his movies, too many of his genre films were or are. So there you go. Hope that's the last word on this. But you can keep arguing. And I'll keep arguing because I love arguing about Raiders of the Lost Ark. For my money, the only real Indiana Jones movie ever made. So there you go. Bruno Bookstore. If you disagree with me, let me know. But you got to use Bruno Bookstore at gmail.com. It's the most reliable way to reach me. That is Bruno Bookstore at gmail.com. That's it. Show's over. Go home. You're still here? Little call back there. Anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching and liking and all that other stuff. And I hope to see you all down the road.